the physical science lesson video for section 5.1, and as always, if you want my videos in one spot, just subscribe to my channel. So chapter 5 is obviously on the periodic table, and one thing about the periodic table you'll find is the more you actually learn about the periodic table as we're going through it in class, the best cheat sheet in the world is the periodic table. But you have to understand what we're going over. So all the things we're teaching you will help you use the periodic table as a guide to help you answer lots of questions on like tests or the EOC, or especially if you move on to chemistry. So we're going to talk about how are the elements organized on the periodic table. Why is it shaped so weird? Why isn't it just a rectangle? So a periodic table is an arrangement of elements in columns based on a set of properties that repeat from row to row. So each time you go to a new row on the periodic table, you get a repetition of properties. So Mendeleev is credited with creating the first useful periodic table. Notice it says first useful. Mendeleev arranged the elements into rows in order of increasing mass so that elements with similar properties were in the same column. So he would go row by row, and anytime elements had similar properties, he would keep them in the same column. And that's how he arranged his periodic table. And this is just kind of an old document that's based off of his periodic table. Mendeleev could not make a complete periodic table of elements because many elements had not yet been discovered. So when he was creating his periodic table, we didn't know all the elements that we know today. So what did he do? Well, he left blank spaces in his table for those elements. So say that he got to the next element and we didn't know of one yet that had those properties, he would just skip that, leave it blank, and move on and fill in the elements that we did know. He used the properties of elements located near the blank spaces in his table to predict properties for undiscovered elements. So then what he did was he would look back at the blank spot that he had to skip over, and he would look at the elements above and below it, and he could predict properties about the element that we didn't even know about yet. And he was actually very accurate with that too. That's why we say his periodic table was useful. So the close matches between Mendeleev's predictions and the actual properties of new elements showed how useful his periodic table could be. So like for example, if you look right here, he has two question marks. He's guessing that this is going to have a mass of about 68 and this is going to have a mass of about 70, but he doesn't know what the elements are yet because they haven't been discovered. And so that's kind of what his periodic table was based on, was elements in order of mass and arranged by repetitive properties. So, describe how Mendeleev organized the elements into rows and columns on his periodic table. Well, he put them in order of increasing atomic mass, and in his columns, the elements had similar properties. So, he put them in order of increasing atomic mass so that his columns, he would have similar properties in each column. So, number 2, how did the discovery of new elements such as gallium demonstrate the usefulness of Mendeleev's periodic table? Remember, he would predict properties about elements that hadn't been discovered. So gallium hadn't been discovered yet, but yet he predicted properties, and then when they did discover gallium, it actually had those properties. So in other words, how did it demonstrate the usefulness? He could use his periodic table to correctly predict properties for elements that had not yet been discovered. Okay, it's one thing to make a prediction if it's wrong. Like I could say, oh, even though it's May, I think it's going to snow right now. That's a prediction. But then when it doesn't snow, that doesn't give me much credibility. So he predicted the properties, and then when they actually would discover those elements, his properties would be correct. Number 3, why did Mendeleev leave spaces in his periodic table? Because all the elements had not been discovered yet. All of the elements had not been discovered yet. Number 4, how was Mendeleev able to predict the properties of elements that had not yet been discovered? Well, remember, he aligned them in columns based on similar properties. So if he skipped and left a blank, then he could look at the properties in that column, and most likely that element should have the same properties. So for number 4, you can just say he put elements in the same column with similar properties. So the blank space should follow the same properties as the elements in that column. Oh, okay, that's section 2. I thought there was more to the section assessment. Alright, so hopefully now you understand a little bit more about Mendeleev's periodic table and how he arranged the elements.